In the absence of George Gwiz, secretary, I'll ask Jason Becker to call the roll.
Elsa Payne, Chairman,
She is absent.
absent. Ian Featherstone, Vice Chairman.
Present.
George D. Gwist, Secretary, absent. Chuck Worley.
Present.
John F. Claffey Jr.
Present.
Jason Becker, present. Robert Missel,
Absent.
absent. Peter Stump, alternate.
Absent.
Robert Singer, alternate.
Present.
Okay, with the absence of 3 members, Bob, you'll be seated tonight.
I could get 2 votes or
Get
or
one.
3.
You can have one.
This is not one great.
All right. We'll all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Where's the flag?
Outside?
Out there.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, agenda item 4 is election of officers. Are there nominations, and shall we do this as a slate or individually? Well, it's up to you. If somebody would like to make a nomination, I think we can do it either way. Robbie or Gracia, any guidance on that?
Let's do that as a slate. Do it as a slate.
I'll make a motion that we reappoint the current executive board of Elsa Payne as chairman, Ian Featherstone as vice chairman, and George Gwiz as secretary.
Second the motion.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay. On that, and then on that one, then any discussion, any questions?
Just that everybody is
I will-
willing and able.
I can speak for Elsa and myself. Elsa will serve, I will serve. George, I haven't heard from, but I think we all know he will.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, that was easy. All right, invoices.
Invoices. You have the financial report. The first one, Seal, is for reproduction of Ingham Hill Meadowwood 1 plan reproduction. The remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are related to the benefit assessment appeals, 3 bills for depositions, 1 for appraisal services, and 1 for professional services for January. We have in addition, 1 last-minute invoice. It's reimbursement for Jim Vanoli for shorthand transport chains to attach the Kubota more securely to the trailer.
What's the amount on that?
And that is for $563.50. And that's just a brand-new add-on.
That's a legal requirement.
Yes, it is a legal requirement. We apparently weren't chained down sufficiently.
Okay. Why don't we take these and separate them into 2 pieces, the legal and non-legal.
Okay. Then we have the Seal invoice for $731.80. And we have Mr. Vanoli's for $563.50.
Okay, is there a motion to pay those 2 invoices?
So made.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay. All right, any further discussion on this? All right, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, thank you.
Okay, those are okay.
Gracia, which one of these do I sign, there or there? Here?
There. Carl gets to sign the other side.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sorry. Let's see if I
The
can
next
punch you
group
in the
is
nose.
on all the legal bills in the appeals. Is there a motion to pay those bills?
You want me to read them, the dollar
The person-
amounts?
Whoever's going to make, if somebody would like to make a motion, read the amounts, dollar amounts.
Okay. I'll make a motion to pay the legal bills to Sanders, Gale, and Russell Benefit Assessment Appeals for $486.66, to Sanders, Gale, and Russell Benefit Assessment Appeals for Richard Swan Deposition for $556.42. Another bill to Sanders, Gale, and Russell Benefit Assessment Appeals for David Johnson Deposition, $803.31, and another bill to Flanagan Associates Benefit Assessment Appeals for appraisal services in the amount of $6,000. Do we
Laughlin
have the-
Fitzgerald.
Oh, Laughlin Fitzgerald, did I miss them?
Yeah.
Oh, Laughlin Fitzgerald, for the amount of $1,491.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
All right, discussion on those? You want to tell us a little bit about them, Gracia? I think we all received them. Received copies.
Yeah, you all received them. The Catherine Ring deposition and the Richard Swan deposition are two of the individuals who are suing over this. David Johnson is an expert witness.
That one took more time.
Yeah.
And that's the bigger bill that you'll see for a while.
Right.
I know from talking with Carl and John that there's just one deposition left till July.
Okay.
So just to ease your concern about, spending on these appeals, you probably won't see much in the way of bills for the next 6 months.
Yeah. He
depending
said we
upon
might
what
get one, we'll
happens.
get one more, and then we'll not see any for some time.
Okay.
And also, one of the appeals has been withdrawn.
Okay.
So that'll translate to, we're defending 6 or 7 appeals at this point, so the cost drops as those go out.
Good.
Now, looking at the cost of those bills, that's for the court reporter
Yes.
doing the deposition transcript
Yeah.
and all that,
Yeah.
not the attorney's time.
No, these are, and there was agreement made that these kinds of invoices would be passed through directly to the WPCA, not paid by the attorney and then billed.
Okay.
The appraisal services is a little more complicated. There is if I recall correctly, Connecticut state statute that in certain cases relates increased financial benefit for installing a septic system or a sewer or something like that, and
Any benefit, I think.
but what is the rule? It can't exceed, there's a monetary, can't exceed by, but the bottom line is that they had to go out and appraise the properties that appealed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this appraisal services bill is for from Flanagan Associates.
Is that for all of the properties that appealed or partially?
All but one. And that one has not pulled out yet, but we anticipate that that person will. And the Laughlin Fitzgerald is their, you all got it, it's their just normal professional services for the month of January.
Any questions on any of those? Okay. All those in favor of paying the legal bills for the appeals, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstained? Okay, John, were you in favor?
Oh, I was for.
Okay.
Yes. I'm
Thanks.
sorry. I thought I was loud enough.
And I apologize in advance for the February 23rd meeting. There are probably about 18 individual invoices that you're going to have to deal with at that point.
Okay.
So you got away easy tonight.
Okay. All right, agenda item 6. Bruce, I think that's you.
Yeah,
Can join you up here, that's okay.
Of course.
Good evening, everyone. Bruce Chudwick, Chicken Goodwin. Good to see you all again, and I think, as you can see on your agenda, we're ready to move forward with the financing for Phase 2 of the program. And just by way of background, stepping back, as you may recall, we put in a sort of placeholder application for the Phase 2 funding at the end of 2013. Came up with some rough numbers and got that into deep to make sure that we could maintain our place with the funding for both grants and loans and the Clean Water Fund program. We got to June and finalized that application, firmed up the numbers and sent it in at that point in time. And then things sort of came to a little bit of a halt because of issues raised by DEEP regarding the stipulated judgment and the dates for completing Phase 2 that were included in there. And so we just stopped the process for a little while while that started to get worked out. I think it's close to or has been worked out, I think. And again, the idea was the scheduled completion date, I think, in the first round of documents was for September of this year for Phase 2. And we all knew that that just was not going to be accomplishable, if that's even a word. We could not be accomplished in that time frame, and it called into question where we were with stipulated judgment and so forth. So we wanted to sort of take our time and say, let's get these synced if we can. Let's determine what the right date is for purposes of the Clean Water Fund program as to when we think Phase 2 will be done, as well as for the stipulated judgment. We're close on the stipulated judgment, but I think the scheduled completion date now I think has been set for September of 2016 for completing Phase 2. So that was sort of the linchpin of finishing these documents. So we got that date in there. We put that request back into the Treasurer's Office in the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Got back a draft that needed some revisions, and I came down and met with Steve and Jim and Gracia and with Carl to talk about some of the new things that are in the project loan and grant agreement that's different from when we first did this back in 2011. And there's provisions for maintaining or protecting confidential information. That's sort of a standard practice or standard provision in state agreements now, in all their agreements. So you have to have systems in place to protect confidential information if you have any that becomes available to you. We talked a little bit about the requirements for making sure you buy American-made iron and steel products that are part of this agreement as well. Again, this agreement governs the funding that's coming to you. So updates of different provisions under federal and state law. Again, the state is subject to federal laws because they get funding from the federal government as part of the Clean Water Fund program. So the state puts money in, the feds put money in, so all those requirements flow into the agreement. So we finished up the agreement and sent that down to you the other day. And at this point in time, we're ready to move forward and ask that you approve it. Just by way of background with the numbers, when we applied for the loan and grant and funding under the program back in June, the $15,281,606 is the total cost for Phase 2, for both grant and loan, everything, all in, okay? And we had applied for grant and loan, split it up. Again, the grant's coming from the state, the loan's coming to the town in two pieces, one a GO loan and one a special assessment loan, general obligation loan and special assessment loan. So that's the 25% being paid by the taxpayers and the other 50% being paid by property owners. When we got back the numbers on the budget, we had noticed that the grant amount had been reduced by about $96,500. So we went back to DEEP and asked about that. And it related to our fees, Shipman and Goodwin's fees, which in Phase 1, DEEP was comfortable that some of our fees were for implementation of the program and more along the lines of consulting costs for getting the program off the ground, and therefore allowed them to be grant eligible. For Phase 2, they said, you're not grant eligible. You can have a loan for it, but not grant. So the grant came down by about $96,500. So, and we pushed back on that. I think different people had discussions about that, but got a response from Deep that I think everybody seems, comfortable with. So the numbers that are in the agreement that, I'm not sure if you received them, but of the $15,281,606 is the total cost, the grant is $3,583,328, and the loan will be $11,698,278. So that's the breakdown. And then that loan of $11,698,278 will be 1/3 the towns and 2/3 the property owners. And that's how the whole program would split out. If you spent all $15.2 million, which, as we saw in phase one, we didn't come close to spending the $10 million as allocated for phase one. So that's where we are. I know that the state is very anxious to move forward with the funding. I know all of you are. So what we did was we put together resolutions for your consideration. The first one in your package, item number 6, you just walk through it briefly, is we have 3 whereas clauses. So we just talk a little bit about the background of the program. We have the $42,171,200 appropriation and bond authorization in place that was approved in August of 2009. That bond resolution provides that the first selectman and Board of Selectmen, treasurer, and other town officials and employees are authorized to take all actions to apply for and accept and receive grants and loans and to borrow money for the program. The third whereas clause says the project loan and project grant agreement that the state offers is a portion of that will be a special limited obligation of the town, which will be backed solely by the benefit assessments that you alone have the power to implement and enforce. And therefore, the WPCA should be part of the signing process of this. I mean, in phase one, we had the chair of the WPCA and first selectman sign all the documents for the benefit assessment portion of the loan. So now, therefore, be resolved that the agreement as presented to the meeting tonight is approved, and further resolved that the chairman or vice chairman are authorized to execute and deliver the agreement and the project loan obligations, which are the just short-term obligation called an interim funding obligation, and then which is used as a drawdown loan, so you draw down those monies over time when you're done with the project, done with phase 2. We close that out into what's called a project loan obligation, which is the long-term 20-year debt that you start paying back. So the chair or vice chair is authorized to sign not only this agreement, but also all the agreements that we need to do to take down the loan. And that will take place after we get through the Board of Selectmen with the same process. We'll bring these resolutions to the Board of Selectmen for their approval and delegation to the first selectman to sign everything, and to enter into all agreements for both the agreement and the financing portions of this. So that's the first resolution for your consideration, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay. All right, somebody like to make the resolution?
I'll make a motion to adopt and,
You just do
approve of the resolution to approve project loan and project grant agreement and clean CWF loan obligations.
Mm-hmm.
And do you would?
No, that's just, and this will be part of the record. This resolution will be part of the minutes, right? So we will.
It's version 3915324V1.
Right.
For clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any questions, further discussion?
There's no mention of the 15 million in this resolution.
It is part of the agreement. It is, the budget is in the agreement. Okay, so the budget page, which is Exhibit 6 to the agreement. And again, the numbers tie out exactly to what we applied for in June, except the grant is lower by $96,500. So, if they were different, we would have a different discussion. But that page is in your agreement if you want another copy of that. So that's the budget for it.
Okay, so we don't have a copy of the agreement, or at least I've not seen it, or I do have it?
I sent it down, but yesterday, the day before, I think I emailed it down, but it's
like 56 pages.
yeah, it's a fairly long, I did make copies of the budget page, because that's the critical page, okay, so.
Better than nothing.
Yeah. Again, the agreement is very much like what we had in phase 1. It's the same types of terms and provisions for how we draw down the loans, how we pay them back. The key thing is the scheduled completion date, and that's September 30th of 2016. So that's when you're supposed to be done. In a perfect world, you'd be done, and we'd be
financing the long-term portion at that point in time. We can go out up to a year after that if we need more time. But that's the date that the state uses to key into all their funding for all the cities and towns in Connecticut that are drawing on the Clean Water Fund monies.
So September 30th?
Yeah.
What year?
2016,
16.
next year.
Okay.
Yep.
And was that date extended?
Yes,
Yes.
it originally was this year,
Yes, that was,
2015.
I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that was a major concession that we got.
Well, I'd like to talk about it now if we're gonna
Sure.
improve, if we're gonna
Oh, okay.
approve this, I'd like to know, excuse me, what the change is.
I'm sorry, actually, I want to make a correction. This is, I think, September from what the last, it's December 31st of 16. That's what we agreed to. Okay, so we,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah.
So it was extended by how much? Because we are getting a late start on phase 2.
Well, it was September 30th of this year.
Of
This year.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're getting more than a year's extension.
15 months, apparently.
Okay,
but the key thing is what Bruce mentioned, is that we don't have to pay back for a year after that. So that gave us, in not really knowing exactly what we were gonna do for phase 2, the comfort level to know we would do enough conventional construction in that time to have assessments so that we could start paying that back if we needed to.
Mhm.
are they giving us this extended amount of time for us to look at alternatives besides? I mean, I think they're being quite generous to give us an additional 15 months. I mean, we're starting phase 2, how many months behind? 5 or 6 months?
Well, they.
I mean, I'm not gonna look a gift horse in the mouth, I'm just
No,
wondering why.
But it's dependent upon a very aggressive approach on our part to keep the program moving in terms of conventional work and to vet the viability of community systems very quickly to know which direction we're going in.
Well, and I think we have established a lot of credibility there because we have been very diligent in phase 1.
Yeah, I mean, based on what we've done so far. I
Right.
mean, you know, we just need to, I think it's not credibility with us as a program, it's credibility of the project itself to accomplish what we say it's gonna do at this point. If we can demonstrate that we have dispersal sites for effluent, it's the key to knowing that we can go ahead with the plan we have, and that's really where it begins.
Okay, I have another question about, December 31st, 2016 is completion date? What date is it?
That's the schedule, that's when you should be
Done
done,
with
all
construction.
the work and ready to close out the loans in phase 2.
So that
completion
is
of the project.
less than 2 years from now.
Right.
I think that's a challenge, but
That is
It
a
is.
real challenge.
I mean, we've always tried to push for more time for you. I mean, remember when we extended the last phase 1, we asked for 2 years and got 8 months, or 10 months, I think it was.
You know,
So it's, the state wants you to move forward, and this is all plays into the STIP too.
yeah,
just to get a
I mean,
judgment.
I'm gonna get into all of this in my presentation,
Mhm.
but we've had major aspects of this program out of sync. And, you know, moving forward, we're trying to get our fundamental sort of underpinnings of the program synchronized. Bruce
Mhm.
and the financing being one part of it. And it's, the point I would like to make is that it would be difficult enough with clean water funds coming and going for a fixed project that was a long-term project that was defined. We have an innovative program that is somewhat labile, and we still have to address funding for it on different occasions. So,
Mhm.
you know, it's a challenge on our part, and it's a challenge on Deep's part also, to make sure that these things line up in a reasonable way
Right.
for us, for the program.
Okay, so just one more question.
Mhm.
So how many conventional systems do we have to do in phase 2? How many of the 600 properties are
We have that all,
conventional?
we have that all scheduled out. It's part, there was an attachment to what I sent out that lists the work that we plan to do. It's a schedule.
I know,
It's an exhibit to
I saw the
proposal.
schedule, I just don't remember how many
I mean,
properties.
this year, we're
conventional.
planning to do, you know, a little over 280 conventional, and we will be continuing with conventional at pretty much the same level in 2016. So these are the exhibits I'm referring to. As
Yeah, I have.
part of what I
got
sent
this
out.
stuff. Okay, so just one question on the schedule here. We have 204 properties in 2015, another 156, it looks like, or 256 in 2016. And then we have properties scheduled 2017, 2018, but we just said that construction has to be done by 2016.
Phase 2 work.
Okay,
Yeah, this includes all of them, doesn't it?
Part of the proposal moving forward is really blending the phases more, which were based on a concept that's started 10 years ago, and a work schedule that no longer exists. So it's an estimate of how we're going to approach this. And it's all somewhat dependent upon, you know, what happens as we go. There are a lot of considerations in estimating what we do. It's technical, it's other circumstances, and a lot of just program
Okay.
events that go into trying to plan that.
I understand that, okay, but we're asking for $15 million that includes a certain amount of work, okay? We're taking care of the money side of it. But we're only taking care of part of the construction side of it, the way I'm looking at this. We get the 15 million, but we're only planning on spending 2/3 of that, or, you know, from when I'm looking at your schedule.
We have two parallel tracks. We have conventional construction, and we have a plan for the development of community systems at the same time. So there'll be some funds of spending for that as well.
So I think what I'm getting from this is that the project is in flux. It's not going as it was originally drawn up, where there was going to be a certain number of properties in each phase. If a community system comes together, it will shift an awful lot of properties into this phase.
Right.
And for that, we need the money.
I understand that.
At least for, in that time frame, for the initial investigation and design.
Right. Anything else, Bob? Anybody else? All right. All those in favor of adopting this resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. At this point, we will seat Peter Stump.
What again?
This evening.
You need to get, you pass something along to Bob.
Did you get a?
Oh, but I don't need it.
You don't? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It was my personal.
yeah, it's personal.
They were extras.
Do you have an extra?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'll take one as well. I have it. He said he brought copies, so
Yes.
I'll take him up on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item. One where we pledge the money back.
Right, exactly, right.
Which I think they probably want.
Yes.
Okay.
This is the exact same resolution that we did after, or when we were beginning the funding for Phase 1. And what this basically says is that, that the WPCA is going to issue or levy benefit assessments in accordance with your policy from November 1st of 2010, when you first put the benefit assessment policy in place. And you wish to pledge those to the state of Connecticut for repayment of the Clean Water Fund loans that you take down under the agreement that you just approved. And therefore, you hereby pledge the benefit assessments as security for the payment of principal and interest on the loans you draw that are the special assessment loans. And further resolve that while any portion of those loans remain outstanding, the powers, duties, and obligations of the WPCA to implement and enforce the policy shall not be diminished or impaired. In other words, a non-impairment of the November 2010 resolution, so you can't change that. That would impair, in a fashion that would impair your ability to collect benefit assessments, to pay back the benefit assessment loans. And that the chairman and vice chairman are authorized to execute and deliver documents to that effect. We will need that type of certification as part of the closing for the funding side. So we thought we'd get this resolution taken care of at the same time we came down for the loan and grant agreement to be approved.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
I will make a motion to adopt the resolution to enforce the wastewater management district benefit assessments and pledge the revenues therefrom to the repayment of the applicable Clean Water Fund loan obligations. Version 3915298V1.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll give that one to Pete. Okay, very good. All right, any further discussion on this, or this is pretty clear cut?
Pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Okay, basically says we're gonna pledge to pay back the money.
You'll do the benefit assessments, and you will follow that November 2010 policy, and will not impair your ability to be able to assess and collect those monies so you can pay back that portion of the loan. Right.
Can we ask the federal agencies and state agencies to do the same?
To make sure that they're going to provide funding for you?
In a timely way, yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, no,
How far are we behind are we? I'm sorry, I digress, I apologize.
Hopefully the state's been pretty good about making payments into the Clean Water Fund program. They're,
Payments, yes.
yeah,
Don't
yeah,
disagree with that.
right, but paying their debts, no.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? All right, in that case, all those in favor of adopting this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and abstains? All right. Okay, now, Bruce has requested a short recess to sign all these, correct?
I need you to sign four signature pages of the agreement, and I need 2 witnesses. So if we could just do it right now?
Do it right
Perfect. So we have it set up for you, Mr. Vice Chairman, so you can sign there and date it today, and then if 2 people could sign over here, sign your name and print the name underneath, then I'll be on my way.
Comment or not?
You want to sign the document?
You
The
sign,
lawyers are on their way, it's always good.
Yeah, that's right.
sign
On the
on
way
top,
out.
print on the bottom.
Yes.
Exactly, yeah, sorry, yeah. Thank you,
Should
Jim.
I do it in blue?
Yeah,
Let's
that'd be
do it in
great,
blue.
yeah.
There's a distinction between in and out.
Right, in and out, you know what, coming in and out is fine.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I wanted you to print underneath, that we need 2 witnesses. Sorry, so you,
Oh,
okay.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, that's all right. Just cross that out and put your, that's okay. And just print underneath, yep.
Okay.
And then someone else can,
You need another witness.
Yes.
Or give it to me, I'll do it.
Yeah. Wayne's Dick Chuck.
You go to jail, I don't care. Chuck's done so many things.
So-
Give somebody else a turn.
So sign your name above the line, Bob, and then,
Okay.
no.
Down here somewhere.
Be indicted as a co-conspirator.
Where Jason signed.
Yeah, sign right there and then print it.
Okay, okay, so he
Yeah.
used my space.
Yes, he did. On only one though.
He was
So
in
far.
your space.
Let it be shown that we took care of this in a prompt fashion
Yes.
to minimize the cost.
And I'm keeping the lawyer's pen.
You can have that.
We'll get billed for it, though.
It'll be a sign. I don't
Another
think so.
10 cents.
You only sign one letter of your name and you get another pen, but the president doesn't sign the bills. Right?
We got two more to do.
Thank you, lawyer jokes. Tough crowd.
There's two.
Now, this is for the agreement, when we do the loan financing, we'll try and arrange to have that done in conjunction with the selectmen's meeting, so we can come down on it one more time. And Carl can sign all those along with either you or Elsa.
Okay, very good.
But this has to go up to the state, this goes to the state, up to the Commissioner of Deep, he reviews it, signs it, then it's gotta go to the Attorney General's office, which is where the big holdup usually is, because they have to sign and approve everything as to form, so. Okay,
Okay, I think you are all set.
thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
you,
Bruce.
Appreciate your efforts so far.
Thanks, Steve, okay.
Okay. Agenda item 8 is the Phase 2 Planning Workshop.
Okay, good evening. There's a lot to convey. Glad to have an opportunity to talk to the board finals. We have a meeting on it. Much of my effort since we met and in the last few months has been focused really on Phase 2 and long-range planning. Before we get to that, because we haven't had a meeting, I have a few things that I have to go over quickly. We did get a letter from one of our residents that had a few issues. Jim Vidoli prepared a response to that, which is attached, and I'm passing that out for your review.
Is this a good response also?
I believe that you'll see that response is fair and adequately addresses the concerns. Our staff has been working very hard on the conventional upgrades that we need to do this year. As you know, we started that planning last fall. We were intending to put the contracts out early enough to get a March 1st start. Things got complicated with the funding. We were able to get a prior approval from DEEP to advertise for our first bid. That's in place. We had a pre-bid meeting. The Fuss and O'Neill report reflects what they did to support the first bid that went out. The Maple Avenue North area was a little bit harder to get organized. We had residents that really lagged on the timeframes to make it an efficient process for us. So the staff spent a lot of time chasing down people. We're pretty much there. They've done a really great job getting that together. And we have a number of contracts that we'll be putting out over time. But what Bruce was talking about is key, because that money has to get approved in order for us to have it available when the first bid is awarded, because currently we don't have funds to provide. So another reason to keep that moving. Gracia did the majority of work on the budget, and the proposed budget, I think, is very modest and really good shape. The staff contributed to that. We had a workshop with Carl and Lisa. They had a few minor modifications which were made, and I think we're in pretty good shape with our proposed budget. The appeals we already talked about. I have done a little work with enforcement, had a few meetings and conference calls with our lawyers. I'll talk about that in detail at the next meeting. A few things in play, and I'll know more then. Before I start, I'd like to introduce John Bracchio, who's the CEO of Wright Pierce Engineering. Also with him tonight is Chris Pierce, who's the senior project manager for Wright Pierce. And I will explain in a minute why they're here.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
No problem. Just to put this discussion in perspective, I want to back up to the end of phase 1, end of October. We had the opportunity to evaluate what we had done in phase 1, what went well, what issues we had. We try to look forward in terms of what not only phase 2, but what the whole project needed. And we wanted to review any circumstances that have changed or conditions that might affect what we were planning to do. The end result of that effort was a proposal that I submitted to DEEP just before Christmas. And that proposal was aimed at synchronizing 3 fundamental aspects of this program: the funding, the stipulated judgment, and the program plan itself. And we were having some real issues because those things weren't in sync. DEEP came back pretty quickly with a revised proposal outline for me to flesh out, which I did, and they requested that we meet as soon as possible in the new year. On January 15th, Jim Benoli, John Wordham, our attorney, and Dennis Greasy from DEEP met in Hartford to go over this proposal, discuss those fundamental aspects of it, try to come up with a plan to move this forward in an organized, meaningful way. And we were very successful, I think, in terms of what we were able to accomplish at that meeting. What Bruce talked about was the first part, and that was key, getting that date moved out in terms of our repayment schedule, to give us a little room, breathing space, and a comfort level with what we could do. The stipulated judgment is, we're still sort of aiming at the same end point, but we obviously couldn't make September 30th of this year. So the ability to move other dates within that time frame and do what we want to do depends upon our ability to move quickly, credibly, and be successful with the program planning that we're presenting. And the program plan is sort of 2 tracks. It's our conventional work, which we have always planned this year. That wasn't an issue. DEEP is insisting that we continue with the conventional work in 2016, which means we have to start planning it this year, before we really have some answers that I would like to have if we had the time. But they're putting a lot of pressure on us. The other track of the proposal is to look at circumstances that exist right now in terms of community systems to see if we can handle some difficult properties that we're moving into with that sort of an approach. And one benefit of doing that is that we may be able to, if we're successful in that regard, we can change the advanced treatment designation on some other properties that, for technical reasons, could be remediated by conventional systems. So all of this remains to be seen. But key to this effort is a scope of work to be done by an engineering company to get the answers that we need from the community system. And what I sent to you was the proposal that is pretty much the final draft. DEEP has looked at it, there's a few final revisions. At that point in time, I didn't have the scope that has now been drafted. And I sent you Jim's original scope that he put together to submit to DEEP as a starting point. So that has morphed into a draft that Wright Pierce has put together with not only input from us, but with input from DEEP as well. They're here tonight, they're gonna go through it page by page because you have not had an opportunity to look at it yet. It just, in the timeframes and obligations that we had, we just didn't have it available before. So that's the reason they're here, to give you a better idea of what that scope is. They're available to answer any questions that you might have. Because of DEEP's interest in vetting this quickly, it is a very focused, kind of scaled down scope. It's not something we would have done maybe if we had more time. It's really aimed at quickly getting it the information we need. That's what I want to say about the scope.
Can I have it?
Yeah, just one second. The other thing we did in very preliminary fashion was add a design aspect to this, a construction aspect, which are really to be determined, to be discussed and really fleshed out down the road, depending upon whether this first effort in terms of getting the information really succeeds. So there's, the fundamental to this is an understanding, both on the engineering company's part and on DEEP's part, that this is an innovative program. They understand the community aspect of this. They understand that we need approvals along the way, that there's a lot of client input, meaning the WPCA program, and also input from DEEP because of the oversight that they have on the program. So we talked about some of those aspects of it. And they put it together as a scope and agreement so that, when we finally decide this is what we want to do, we can get our attorneys to quickly put it in the form of a contract. We're going to need quick approvals on these things moving forward. So I'll entertain any questions at this point before I turn it over to John, if you have anything you want to ask at this point.
AT systems, where do they fit into this scope? I mean, are we gonna still have some AT systems?
It's possible. The issue with AT systems is that initially there was an intention to have a parallel track to develop permitting and performance standards, which turned out to be more difficult.
Turned out that it didn't happen in 6 years.
It didn't happen in this time frame. Even if we had those, there are performance issues, there are cost issues with ATs, and the other thing that really has changed since this program started is sea level rise and coastal storms, which for me personally kind of really tips the balance on ATs. They're a system you would use if you had to use them to remediate a very difficult property. There are issues with maintenance, and the original proposal has close to 300 of these systems to be able to monitor. It would be on almost 300 on individual properties. So the thought is, if we can get a community system that would pull in the AT designated systems, some of them we don't know. We don't know until we do this, if it's even possible or how many are possible. It would take that issue away and create a better technical outcome, and we're hoping a more cost-effective outcome as well, and a performance and maintenance issue that you could monitor and measure more easily. So nothing's off the table at this point. We're just trying to look at where we are now, what's the best way moving forward, and we need to explore what we think might be the best approach and try it before we just blindly follow what had been set up years ago and no longer apply.
Okay. I'm ready for the big show.
I have some questions,
Go for it.
if I could. And I would like to take a step back first. By understanding that there was a subcommittee that was established to vet engineering services. And you started with, I don't know how many engineering firms.
Right.
And you narrowed that down.
Right, we went through that whole process, and members of the board were involved, you know, our staff as well. And we started with 10.
Okay.
We had a whole process that had to be followed
Right.
to meet Clean Water Fund regulations. And we we selected 5 firms to interview. And some of the board members were on those interviews as well.
Which board members were? Because I certainly wasn't.
Elsa, Pete, were you there? Were any of them? I'm trying to remember who
believe
else.
so. The demonstrations?
No, our interviews.
No, I
The
did not get
RFQ.
it.
Remember Robbie, who else might have been there?
Also met a few.
Yeah, Elsa was there.
So Elsa's the only person only board member that.
I don't remember. I thought we had more, but I don't know.
This is a process that the DEP established on how
Yeah.
to select.
No, I
Right, but
understand
just-
that.
You can't
just keep
conduct
going.
effective-
Okay.
Yeah,
So you started with 10 or whatever, and then you narrowed the
Right.
field down
for 5.
to 5, and then I seem to recall in one of your reports that you were down to 2.
We were down to 2, and we re-interviewed both Wright Pierce and another firm.
Okay.
And based on what we thought we needed in the credentials of either firm, we made a final selection of Wright Pierce.
And who made that selection?
Our WPCA.
I didn't make any selection that I recall, unless I missed a meeting.
No, I'm saying our staff made the selection.
That's not the way it works. A recommendation should come from the subcommittee to the board for their consideration. And then the board then, reviews and approves that recommendation. So at least from my perspective, that should be the procedure. That's been the procedure in the past.
Is that a procedure that existed, or is that a procedure we are mandated to follow?
I was under the impression.
I think it's
it was
common sense.
This is what we're here for,
Right.
to find out, make a decision, but the decision has already been made, and we, the board members, have not had any input to it at all.
I'm sure you've done, a very thorough job, and, members would probably come up with the same conclusions, but it's still, the recommendation should have been made by the subcommittee to the board for their approval, for their sign-off.
I mean, you could be right, but Elsa's been
I'm-
part of this process, and I never heard anything from her in this process.
I agree with you 100%. It is, I don't think it's within the staff's, let me say that right. I don't think the staff has the ability to approve or select or expend any money without going through the board. And this has not hit the board yet at all,
Right.
so. Good question.
And I also have a little concern about the plans that you have gone ahead and spoken to the DEP about before really running it by us and saying, do you agree with this direction? You kind of went and did it, and then you said, this is the direction we're taking.
Well, we had timeframes we had to operate in, and, we had input from administration on this, and Elsa's been part of this whole process as well. And it was, we're just under the gun to do this in these timeframes, and I went deep.
I don't think
Sure.
any decision,
And
no
we're
decision
not
has been
asking
made.
for any money.
No
We're
decision
not-
has been made on a project. I think Steve was fairly clear that it's a parallel path. It's investigating another possible option.
I would just like to know a little more in advance of what, you're strategizing and thinking about going to talk to DEEP about before it happens, rather than after the fact.
It's a fair point.
That way, if, that provides us an opportunity to give you feedback. We may just say, sure, sounds great, or no, we have other input, or you shouldn't be talking about that, or whatever. Now it's kind of, the cart has come before the horse.
And I think we're gonna have to, I'm okay with going ahead with the presentation, but I think sometime we're gonna have to figure out how to get that cart back behind the horse.
Well, I
We
think
gotta
that
do it pretty quick, too.
the way to do it would be to get a recommendation from the subcommittee to the board for their, for their
Who's on the
consideration.
subcommittee?
I don't know if necessarily was even a subcommittee, and I don't know, Elsa would be able to answer this question. But it would come as a recommendation from staff up to the board and say, this is the direction we're going, and should we proceed?
Yeah,
in that direction?
you could even come from you, the program manager,
That's correct.
and say, this is the procedure that we did. We went from 10.5 down to 2, and these are our reasons, blah, blah, blah. We would like your approval. Just like you did for the clean water funding thing. That's what we're here for.
My feeling as far as saying that we're under the gun with DEP, and I've said this before, tell DEP to stop. We're the ones that have to do this, and they put such pressure on us to do things that all of a sudden this happens, and we're being told that this is what's going to be done. Tell them to slow down up there. They have more money and they want us to do it. Let us do it. We have to, stand firm on this. And maybe I'm totally off the mark here, but I feel this is being shoved right down our throats.
This isn't, no, DEEP isn't shoving any plan down our throats.
But this
We
is
have
here
stipul-
because
we have-
DEEP has told us that we have to do it lickety-split.
We have, the stipulated judgment obligates this town to the dates.
That's right. But at the same point in time, we have to say, hey, give us a break.
I think they have given us a break by
Well,
extending
they-
phase
they-
2
right, and
by
they have
15
to-
months.
But
Listen, they can play hardball.
Right.
I know they can play hardball, and I know that there are people in this town that want to have that pipe put in. And all the money that has been spent is going to be thrown away because if some people have their way, the pipe will be put in. And then everybody's going to get screwed over. But that's my feelings on the way they are doing it up there. My feeling is this thing right now is being shoved down our throats. I'm sorry. We should, as a board, have been given a little more information than having something handed to us this evening. I'm sorry.
I sent the proposal out almost 2 weeks ago, and no one ever got back to me.
This is the first, if this is the proposal, it's the first time I have ever seen it.
I got it 2 weeks ago, but 2 weeks ago is really not enough. What is missing here? And if you say that you've communicated with Elsa, which is fine, Elsa's not here to say yea or nay, so we kind of need to table that discussion. I don't think we want to go there tonight without Elsa here, but if you pass it on to Elsa, Elsa certainly didn't pass it on to me, obviously not to Chuck and some other people here, so we're totally uninformed. But since Elsa's not here, can't really go there tonight, but we're not informed. It doesn't mean, by the way, that I'm not interested in the community systems, because I definitely think that that's where we have to go. We have to end up to get some of this done. But I don't know, Chuck. We need to work this out, but
I'm not criticizing the work of the
I'm not
subcommittee.
criticizing.
I'm just saying we need to follow a procedure.
Who's the subcommittee? Who's the subcommittee?
Staff,
Staff is the
from what I
subcommittee?
can
Yeah, but
gather.
the board, a subcommittee is a part of the board, not of the
Right,
staff.
it can't be all comprised of staff.
Right.
But it doesn't really matter, because the staff is making a recommendation. I think the problem
But
here
they
is that
haven't.
it's coming.
Is that we don't have a subcommittee.
They don't
Well,
have,
no,
they don't have a recommendation.
The recommendation is missing, and that's,
Yes,
it's a fair point.
that's all I'm saying.
It's a fair point.
That's all I'm saying.
I think we can move forward with it, because effectively what we're talking now is about the recommendation. This is a recommendation. We're not doing anything. You're not asking for anything tonight.
but even more basic, the recommendation for the engineer.
Yeah.
The subcommittee went through that whole process of narrowing it down to an engineer. And I know Ray Pierce is very capable.
Right.
I'm just looking for a recommendation from the subcommittee to the board, and the board say, okay, we agree.
Again, but I think that that RFQ process could accommodate the staff following that process and then bringing it to the board. It doesn't have to come from a subcommittee. It can come from the staff and say, we followed the DEEP's process to select an engineer. These are the ones we've
Sure.
selected.
Right, but that isn't.
I'm just saying,
That has not
we,
happened, but
it hasn't,
I
right.
don't, okay. It's a very valid point. I agree with you.
We're all on the same page.
But I don't
We're
think.
going
it
to
should
say a
hold
little
us up.
differently.
I don't think it should hold us up tonight, because,
No.
you know, I also,
No. No.
I do respect the fact that Steve is pushing this thing.
Yep.
And I'm thankful for that, because we do have a tight deadline because of the stipulated agreement, which is very little to do with the DEP. It is more to do with a judgment. And so
Steve
I
is
appreciate
doing-
where he's coming from.
doing a terrific job.
Right, I appreciate where he's coming from. I think we just have a minor little procedural issue in between there that shouldn't hold us up tonight, but your point is valid.
Well, my question is, do you want to hold up the process
No.
on that procedure?
No.
We stop right here.
No, I'm just saying, I'm looking for that recommendation, so we can,
Oh, okay, so I'm not sure what you're asking. Okay, let's just go back. They're here to make a presentation.
Would you like us to step out?
No,
Yeah.
no, this is, we're on TV.
We
here,
understand what you're
so
talking
yeah,
about.
it's-
We are not a rubber stamp board,
Right.
Understand.
Right.
so this is good.
So we're being recorded, it's not a big issue. In your mind, have they been selected or not selected?
Yes, we already had a deadline by DEEP to do that.
Okay.
I think we're just missing a step along the way, that's all.
Yeah, we almost have to have a timeout here.
I'm not sure that we have to have a timeout, but I don't think it precludes them seeing
No,
a
I don't think,
presentation
I don't, it
or
precludes them.
preparing for that.
Right.
Except
It
res-
could even be helpful.
recommendation acceptance.
It could even be helpful in that, I don't think we want to do that. It could even be
I
helpful
can't,
in
it's a
the,
special meeting.
right, in the, going forward with the missing step, which is, we can hear the information, we can see it, we can get the background on it, we can also then, at that point, have a little better understanding of the selection process, and at that point, if a formal recommendation is made that we followed this process and procedure to select engineers, we've seen the presentation, we'd like to go forward with these engineers and have our presentation.
So do we want to add an item on our agenda
can't.
later on? We
No,
can't.
I don't, I don't
Special
think,
meeting.
Special meeting, we can't do it.
I don't think we want to do that in.
Okay.
I think we can,
For what it's worth, to support Steve's position, I did take a number of weeks to review the RFQs, responses that came in, including that of Ray Pierce, and look at the credentials and the basis of the individual firms for saying, you know, we're capable and qualified to do this work, and we want to, here's some background material and similar projects that we've done in the past. So from that perspective, I've reviewed the responses that you had in your office as part of the preparation. It just turned out that I never got to be able to attend any of the interview sessions, so I was involved from that perspective.
But again, none of that was presented to the board.
Yeah, I agree. You know, and You know, there's a range of ways of communicating this situation.
Okay, so was it
Some
communications?
places have a.
It was a communications failure, not saying that it's your fault or Steve's fault,
sometimes
it's part of the
There were-
board's
There were
fault.
several meetings where I reported that we were in that
Yes,
process,
right.
and we
That's true.
were going through that selection
Yeah.
process.
Yes, I remember that.
We agree.
But we did not get the recommendation, that's all.
Yeah, we agree with that. But I guess I have to agree that I'm accustomed to hearing a basis for the selection and a recommendation that's accepted. And I concur that seems to be a step that would be appropriate to move forward. The one question I had, and I don't really want to muddy the water, but is there are there any options that we anticipate needing that are not covered by this scope? You said the AT system may or may not come into play. Are there any others that may or may not be needed as we go through this scope? Or do we have a vehicle by which we can amend the scope if that's necessary?
I believe that would be a separate process,
Okay.
because this is focused solely on community systems, correct?
Yeah, it is, but it's,
On the feasibility of it.
Yeah, we're looking, they're looking at the whole project as what's the solution? We think we can do this, but as we go through it and uncover things, could discover different direction. I mean, one of the reasons we selected this firm was extensive experience with on-site systems and different dispersal methods. There's nothing that's really preconceived here, and the idea was to keep an open mind about how to best go about doing this.
You can just do an amendment if it's not covered at a future date.
That's what I thought. I just want to. That's an assumption. I want to make sure I'm not.
Yeah, no, I mean, the
correct.
scope has to say we're gonna
Yeah.
do this and
Right.
define something, but certainly we'd have the option, the flexibility to work within it. I personally, in speaking with them, feel very comfortable about the ability to do that, or make any changes. They're very enthusiastic about this project.
I suppose they're gonna do this for nothing, right? They're gonna-
Yeah, they love
So
this
far.
so much, so far.
Okay, so,
Well-
okay.
While you're here, you might as well proceed.
Well, yeah, we need to,
So why don't we?
we need to.
Is it the
100%.
board's-
Yeah,
Let's
we-
proceed.
Let's proceed, yeah.
Because you're not asking for anything
No,
tonight.
right.
That's fine.
Okay.
I think we're okay with that.
Well, we can't.
But it's an excellent point, John. Thank you.
No,
Was there anything else?
we understand what you're debating here and understand, the process. We work with a lot of different municipalities, so, we get your debate here. Just a little background, when I get started here. I wasn't sure where your level of understanding about what we were doing or what we've been asked to do actually is. So I kind of prepared an overview of, and so feel free to ask any questions as we go along here. Yeah, why don't you hand those out? Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, copies of the slides, and we're not charging for the pen.
Not yet.
Thank you.
Got nervous when I turned it.
Consider it right.
It's built in.
Push a button.
Yeah, it's not, it's locked up here.
Thank you.
I got 25 years of computer experience, but I'm expensive.
You are, all right, here we go. It's locked up on you. What do you think, Chris? Just, what I'll do, we did do a submittal quite a while ago, I guess, that had our qualifications and background and everything in there, and I'll just give a real brief overview of our qualifications and talk about some of the people that are on the project team, and then I'll give an overview of the scope of services that we prepared
pretty quickly, recently here, that you have a copy of now. That's actually a photo of a big community system up in Plymouth, Mass. And that was done several years ago that we worked on. All right. So just a little bit about Wright Pierce. This will be a real quick summary. We're a full-service environmental engineering firm. We have over 200 employees in 7 offices. Chris and I are located in our Middletown, Connecticut office. What we mean by full service is we have all the different types of disciplines in-house. We're mostly environmental and wastewater and water engineers, but we also have structural engineers, electrical, civil, architects, mechanical, H&E, but they all serve our water and wastewater projects. We're based in New England. We have 7 offices, but we work as one company, so we bring in resources from the other offices as needed. And we're recognized as being one of the top wastewater environmental engineering firms in the country by a bunch of our trade organizations. As far as wastewater engineering, doing this kind of projects, that's really what the mainstay of our business. About 70% of what we do is wastewater. The other is water and civil infrastructure for municipalities, roads and drainage type systems, but primarily wastewater. So most of our engineers are in fact wastewater or water engineers. Because we worked all over New England for many years doing this, we get one of the advantages of a firm spread out throughout New England like this is we have a lot of experience with how different communities approach their problems. So when we're looking at what you're trying to do, we can go back to our experience and try to see what matches best what your needs are, to try to come up with the most set of cookie cutter type approach. What actually is situations that would work best for your community. So we try to use all our experience when we're looking at each community and tailor what we want to do each time. We do have a good working relationship with the Connecticut DEP. I think Steve's already found that out, that we're well known there. We know all the people. We have extensive experience doing things with the Clean Water Fund, so we understand all the requirements of that. As far as the services we do, from wastewater management planning, which you've already done, to evaluating and designing, decentralized community and centralized type treatment systems. Just 2 little photos there. One's a 16,000 gallon a day decentralized thing, a BioClear system up in Colebrook, Connecticut. But then on the other extent, the project on the bottom is we're doing the Mattabasset upgrade, which is 35 million gallon a day, $100 million treatment plant on Route 9 up there in Cromwell. That's going to be done this June. So we cover sort of the wide range of that. We take projects from the study phase through the design, right through construction. We keep the same team through all the phases. So that's our overall how we handle projects. And we do peer reviews. Like you're here, stepping back, trying to take another look. Is there another way to slice and dice and do the project? We're commonly asked to come in and take a look. I mean, these are, wastewater and treatment in schools are the biggest expenses of a community, and often people come up with a plan and they want somebody else to come in and take a look at it. So doing peer reviews is not an uncommon thing that we're asked to do. As far as treatment plants, whether they're community or centralized or big ones, we have over 100 treatment plants that we've done, hundreds of miles of sewer systems, including low pressure systems, which are more appropriate for community type systems. Literally hundreds of pump stations just in Connecticut and effluent dispersal systems. The picture on the top, if you ever get out to Martha's Vineyard at Oaks Bluff and their town green, that's a dispersal system for their treatment plant there that we did quite a while ago, 360,000 gallon a day system. On the bottom you can't really see it all that well, but for communities along the shoreline, we do a lot of coastal communities. A lot of our experience is up in Cape Cod or in the coast of Maine. These low pressure systems where each house has their own individual pump station, and you have a small a small pump station with a small diameter force main, and that's often used in community or cluster type systems. As far as the project team, myself, Chris, and Mike Giggy, who couldn't be here. Mike's our decentralized wastewater management expert that Jim and Steve have met. We listed out people in-house, the different people that we may need to bring to bear to help on the project. Chris and I are wastewater engineers. I've got over 30 years doing this. Chris is getting up there, probably 25 years. So, actually, I'm 35 years now. It's getting older. One of the key people that we would have on here is on the right, on the sub-consultants, to do the site evaluation work. We have our own hydrogeologist, but we wanted to make sure we had somebody very familiar with the Connecticut new regulations on how to do it, and a firm we've worked with in the past, like at Brashears and Graham, LBG, would be the ones that will be doing the hydrogeological work, which is really a critical aspect of that. And again, everybody on here all they do is wastewater engineering. So you have a scope in front of you, and you'll get a chance to read it. And what I'm going to do is kind of give an overview of what our understanding, based on what Steve talked about in the proposal that was sent up to the DEP, our understanding of it, and what we put in more detail in this draft scope here. So we look at, our understanding is what you want to do is look forward at the Phase 2 wastewater management plan, and is this the best way to approach it moving forward? Is what you're planning to do practical to construct? You've learned on Phase 1 that you can get into some difficulties, especially with the AT systems in low-level areas that could be subject to flooding and be long-term operational issues, and just how practical is it to put these types of systems on low-level lots, where you have also, or lots that you have very shallow groundwater depth, and you're requiring huge amounts of fill. So the goal would be, to look practical and adaptable. Also, though, that the state, their big goal, why were they always pushing you this, was the nitrogen limits. They wanted to see a combination of facilities that would reduce the nitrogen out to Long Island Sound, and that's their TMDL, the hypoxic conditions out there. And so whatever we came up with, we'd want to meet what you've already been approved to do in terms of the pounds of nitrogen that won't go out into Long Island Sound. And an important aspect when you're looking at community systems is the character of the community. With a centralized, big plant, I heard talk about the big pipe or community system, whatever, the issue is, what is the character of the community that you're trying to maintain? And that when you look at the solution, that you're looking at it in a way to maintain that character. If you want to keep things the same in terms of how the community is, and not allow for a system that could promote big redevelopment and big growth, okay, you can do that. If you want big development and big growth, well, you can do that too. But that, we understand. Our understanding is you did this plan the way you've laid it out, and have been coming up with this over the last 25 or 30 years, was to maintain a certain character of the community. So we understand that's going to be an important part when we look at any community type system moving forward. Some additional goals, whatever we do has got to be cost effective and make sense from a cost perspective. One of the things we see with all these types of systems is long-term reliable and compliant. The AT systems, they can work. The way the state operates, and you probably know as well as I do, they don't want to be responsible to make sure those things are working correctly and meet and discharge permit. They're going to put that on your responsibility. And sure, they work great now. How are they going to be working in 20 years, 30 years, when they're on people's personal property? And that's a big issue from my standpoint, from an environmental aspect, looking at these types of systems. So how we look at it, whatever the plan is, that it should maximize the long-term reliability and be compliant in terms of what we're looking for from an environmental perspective. And then ultimately, it's got to be acceptable to the community, the community, and the Connecticut DEP. And I'm sure there's plenty of opinions on what's acceptable or not. But so what we put in our scope here, so those were the goals that we saw that you were looking at. So as we developed the scope with a lot of input from Steve and looking at the proposal that was sent to the DEP by Jim and Steve, so we came up with this. So the overall approach is to identify lots within your program where on-site solutions are not feasible or maybe not the best choice. And you have a whole bunch of information. You have we've been starting to wade through it to get an understanding of what you have. You have all these past reports back to when were the Kearney ones done, right?
75.
Yeah, we got some calculation papers from the DEP from 1983.
Yeah, so at any rate, there's a lot of existing information. Our goal is to try to make the best use of that type as we can. We know that your staff has gained a lot of experience through the phase 1 work, is what kinds of issues you're going to have to deal with as you move into the phase 2 work. And essentially what we want to do with all that information and your staff is to do a lot by lot review of the on-site systems in terms of where you're planning or need to put AT systems and where you're looking at conventional upgrades. And the goal, the end game here is which lots could be better served, make more sense to be served by a community system than either a conventional system or an AP system. Once we know that lot by lot basis, one of the big tasks will be what is the flow rates that you want to allow for those particular lots, because that will then determine the size of the system. And also then to identify which of the lots that we wouldn't list for community system, are there any that would include an AT system and conventional upgrades? In other words, to reshuffle the list that you have right now, to take a look at it, and is there a way to reshuffle it? And the part about your community character and the size of this thing and the flow rate is going to be the aspect of determining the need for growth neutral policy. So the whole issue here is if you put in a community system and the community system has whatever flow rate, if you pick a very conservative flow rate, do you want to allow a property that has 2 bedrooms to be upgraded to 4 bedrooms? If that's redeveloped, if you don't want that to occur, then part of looking at the community system is to come up with what your policy wants to be for future growth, because that's going to determine the size of the system. They all have to be linked together, and we can talk a lot more about that, but that's just an overall one of the things that we see when we're looking at these systems that we want to take into consideration. Now, so concurrently with trying to figure out which lots might be better served by a community system would be, okay, well, where would you put a community system? And the big limiting factor is going to be the dispersal site. That's the whole game right there. We can build treatment plants, that's not a problem, and we can get whatever limits you want. Getting rid of the effluent is the limiting factor. And so that's where we wanted to get the subconsultant to help us do the hydrological investigation, at least the preliminary site investigations, which would be test pits and stand place for monitoring wells, soil tests, and determine the preliminary loading rates. And this is, from what I understand, the DEP wants, before you're kind of changing paths here, the DEP is asking for this first step to be done right away, because they understand that that's the limiting factor for your ability to even consider a community system. Do you have sites that can handle the flow rate that matches the flows that you say are going to come from this lot? So those two things we would try to do together. And if we determine that you have suitable sites, and it looks like you're going to be able to have enough area and conditions are suitable to accept that effluent, we can then look at the treatment types of alternatives that would be appropriate, and there's a whole bunch of them that we're really familiar with. But the goal there is to meet the treatment requirements for nitrogen removal and the state in disinfection, because on the dispersal sites, travel time, you probably all already know all about that. Travel time's a big deal. So the state has indicated that with proper disinfection, you don't need the travel time. All of a sudden, you don't need as big a site when you don't need the 21 days because you pre-disinfected the effluent before it goes onto the dispersal site. So that's something they've changed a bit from in the past when they wanted the 21 days. So that's, but we can look at those alternatives once we say we got a site. These are all things to come up with a cost, evaluate the collection and treatment alternatives. It's the conveyance alternatives, like what's the best way to get the flow up to the community system. And typically, one of the alternatives we would look at are these low pressure systems, which are these little pump stations that are in each person's yard, where their septic tank is or next to it. In combinations that with maybe a neighborhood pump station, and taking a look at what makes the most sense from a cost basis there. After that, cost-benefit analysis, long-term operational costs of the plan that looks like it's that comes out, and start to roll it out along the way as to what we're coming up with. And if it looks like it's viable and it looks like everybody's on board, then there would be a modification of the wastewater management plan that the DEP would need to approve. And that's pretty much, there's much more detail in here, but that's the concept, if it makes sense to what I just said. And if you decided to proceed, we have it, like I said, we have a scope here. If you decided to proceed with us or whoever, if you have to go back through the selection process, the next step would be that you'd have to get the DEP approval of this from either us or whoever before you really wanted to pull the trigger on this, because you get the approval of this, then it's funded by the DEP. So that would be the next step that you'd want to do.
Okay, when you say it's funded by the DEP, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. Totally funded by?
I don't know what discussions you've had.
I don't know that it's, yeah.
I think it would qualify for clean water funding, so we'd be able to use the loan.
The loan process to pay.
Typically, this would be considered a planning study, right?
But, yeah, I'm not sure, since they've already done a planning
Right.
study, if it would still qualify. They offer a 55% grant for planning studies with no loan. And then if it were more considered part of the design or construction process, then it's the 25% grant.
We don't know what that is,
haven't had
but
that
we haven't had any
discussion.
discussions with DEEP at this
Okay.
point. This is just to you guys right now, so.
I'm thinking that because we've already started with the program, the funding level is going to be different.
Yeah, he's not gonna give us another funding grant, I asked him.
Yeah.
Let's go backwards. We have a facilities plan. The facilities plan does allow community systems. So we really can't ask for 55%. Plus, we also have to put the money up. We don't have that kind of money in the sewer avoidance, the 210 account, to put the money up front and get the 55% back.
Right.
Also under the gun, so we can't really go back,
I'd be inclined to feel that they're going to just include it under the line item in the $15 million budget that addresses engineering.
So there's no possibility?
Which was 3 million and change,
Right.
if I recall correctly.
Right.
And it'd just be part of that.
It could be because you've already closed out your planning grant application. So if that's been closed out, you'd probably be correct. Otherwise, you'd have to submit another planning grant application.
Well, I think you'd probably be in 25, 50 land.
Okay.
Okay?
So I kind of went over that quickly. I don't know if you have any questions about us or what we're doing. We understand your debate here and dilemma, but
I just want
it's for
to
information.
go back to the technical issue.
Sure.
The bacterial, taking care of the bacteria, how are you doing that mechanically? You treat it with
The disinfection?
the disinfection, that's what
That's
Yeah.
the word. I mean, it's good. UV is ultraviolet light.
Okay.
It's probably what we're talking about.
Yeah, typically on a smaller system where you're doing, dispersal type sites, you would use UV disinfection. Other larger systems will use chemicals at times, chlorine for disinfection. But something like this is typically a UV.
Okay, so how does that affect a dispersal site in terms of capacity? Does it help with, I mean, you have certain soil conditions, you have one capacity, if you gotta have a travel time.
It eliminates the travel time, or it reduces the travel time.
Right. So you would need-
Yeah, it does.
You would need a certain amount of property to get that 21-day travel time.
Right.
DEP is indicating that they still would want that travel time maximized, but it's 21 days, not a
Not a
set
magic
rule.
number.
It could
It's a
be
huge
5 days or
concession on
7
that
days.
part to even
So-
consider.
Yeah, it's a policy
Now-
that they've had for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
So now the area of that property that you can use for dispersal gets bigger because you get closer to the borders, because you don't need that
Right.
travel time.
But the treatment, the treatment facility itself produces a much higher quality effluent than, than a septic tank or that type of system. So you do get a credit to a certain extent, a higher loading rate, because it's a much cleaner effluent going onto the dispersal field. But they still have a maximum limit, around one, and typically would be like 1.2 gallons per square foot.
Okay, in terms of systems like this, I mean, what's common? 100 houses, 100 homes, 200 homes?
Yeah.
And we're looking at areas that have 150, 200 homes.
This is a big system. This will be one
That
of the
would be a big-
biggest, this would be, as far as we know, would be the biggest, probably if we actually had several hundred that you're talking about, would
I
be one of
think
the biggest
Steve has
systems.
been talking
in the
about
state.
500 or so homes in it,
Yeah, I don't think we'll get that.
you know.
No, you won't be able to find a site.
Yeah, that's be a tough site.
1,000-acre preserve.
I mean, there are, Ledger
It's all rock.
Ledger has a different
all
type
rock.
of system. They have rapid, they have infiltration basins essentially, so big ponds.
Just like that
Yeah.
photo you had of the.
Oh, yeah, the Pine
Pine
Hills.
Hills.
Yeah, Pine Hills are those,
They also have a very unique permit to disperse on a golf course.
what was it?
Ledyard, you talking about Foxwoods?
No, not
No, no.
Foxwoods. So Ledyard has a small system.
Oh.
It's a municipal system.
Yeah, they have a small municipal system, but they actually have, like ponds that infiltrate the water. Like that, you can kind of see here with these ponds. This is up in Plymouth, Mass.
So in terms of number of homes there, how many homes are on that Plymouth system?
I don't remember, but it's a lot. It's hundreds and hundreds. That's a
It is
big
100,
system.
It's a big system.
Yeah, that's a big system. That's 300,000 or 400,000 gallons a day system. That's a bigger than, that's
Yeah.
much, that would be that's why I showed the picture. It'd probably be the size, of what we were talking about. But to do that with a subsurface disposal, it's gonna be tough. That's, you're not gonna be able to do that many homes, is my guess, on the sites. If you were trying to do 500 homes, I don't think you're gonna find enough. That's what's gonna be the limiting factor.
How many acres are on that expensive site?
I don't know. I'd have to go back a while.
It's not true. I'm just trying to get an idea of the scope of where your
Yeah,
experience has been and what we're looking
I
at.
have those numbers in our, still, it was a while ago. Yes. So that was 150,000 gallons. I don't know how many per day, smaller than Lifeway. The Oaks Bluff one was 360,000 gallons a day. Most of the systems that Farmington, most of the systems are much smaller than that. We have Hingham, Mass, 306,000. West Haven, or West Island, Fairhaven, 100,000. Those, we use the thing called a WIC system, which is actually, has never been done in Connecticut, so we don't know if we could even get one of those approved in Connecticut. It's like a reverse well into permeable, fine permeable soils, and you're injecting it down into a well. There's none in Connecticut that we are aware of. So we'd imagine that'd be a real uphill battle to get something like that approved. No.
But just for